Whenever you're ready, Kim.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. So, today again, we're going to be talking about the difference between depression and sadness. Oops, there we go. Okay, so why is it important to know the difference between the two? We often hear the words sadness and depression used interchangeably. And that can kind of imply that they mean the same thing. And the reality is that they are two very different things. And so it's important to know the difference because confusion about that difference between sadness and depression can lead us to neglect a serious condition, such as depression, that does require treatment. Or on the other end of the spectrum, it can cause us to overreact or pathologize a normal emotional state, which is sadness. And so again, if someone is experiencing clinical depression, it is important for that person to seek and receive help, as depression can have a tremendous impact on a person's long-term mental health and physical health. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at how to define those two. So starting with sadness, I really want to emphasize here that sadness is a normal emotional state that every human experiences from time to time. It's part of our emotional and mental health. It's natural for us to experience it, and it's important that we are able to allow ourselves to feel it when sadness arises. With sadness, usually it's pretty temporary. It can last for a brief moment, a few hours, a few days. It's not something that is going on and on and on that you experience throughout the entire day, multiple days in a row. The other thing is it's usually caused by a specific event. So either maybe a hurtful or challenging or disappointing event is usually what will trigger sadness. So, a few examples, maybe getting a poor test grade, having an argument with a loved one, even sometimes just hearing things that are happening on the news are just a few examples of things that can trigger some sadness for us. So again, going on to the next point, it's something specific that we tend to feel sad about. We're able to identify what's causing me to feel this way. And then typically once that event, that difficult event, challenging event has ended, our sadness usually ends as well. And the other important part is you're normally able to still find moments of happiness or joy in other areas of your life, and you're normally able to still go about your normal functioning. You're still able to go to work or school, or attend your social events, engage with your household members and your friends. Those things normally don't change. So now we're going to move into depression. And so again, the big defining difference from sadness is that depression is it's not something that every human experiences. It's not part of our normal range of emotion and experience. It's an abnormal emotional state. And when someone's experiencing a clinical depression, it affects every component of their life. So it affects their thinking, their emotions, their perceptions and behaviors in very significant and chronic ways. It's kind of like putting on a pair of colored sunglasses, and it just puts this cloud over everything. It really changes how you see and experience day-to-day life. Going with that, again, when you're depressed, you feel sad about everything, and there isn't necessarily a specific event or trigger. Sometimes people will say, like, I don't really know why I'm feeling this way. So again, that's a highlighting difference. And it also, as I was alluding to earlier, it's something that affects all aspects of your life. So just everything feels less enjoyable, less interesting, just less worthwhile. And it does have a significant impact on your home life, your social life, and or your work or school life. So as I was saying, with sadness, you're usually able to still go about your normal day-to-day life, responsibilities, routines, things like that. But with depression, that's very different. That's when we're seeing more of a struggle to go to work each day or complete tasks, responsibilities at work, or maybe it's at school. It's affecting how you interact with your loved ones. So that can cause relationship problems. You really see that bleed over and start impacting how you function and interact in those major parts of your life. And actually, before I jump into the signs and symptoms of depression, it's sadness and depression is very individualized. So two people can experience the same event, same upset, same loss. And one person may experience sadness, and the other person might end up going into a clinical depression. And so some things that can impact the difference between that experience for those two people are things like, what sort of support system does that person have? What sort of coping skills do they have? Do they have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? And just also past experiences can really impact how we experience difficulties and challenges in life. So now looking at some signs and symptoms of depression. This is just kind of a brief overview of things we look at with clinical depression. So again, it's having a depressed or irritable mood most of the time, most days of the week, having a loss or decreased interest in most activities, including ones that you previously enjoyed doing. Seeing significant changes in weight or appetite. When it comes to food and appetite, in general, people kind of tend to swing to one end of the spectrum or the other. So some people end up completely losing their appetite and are losing weight because they just don't have that desire to eat. And some people go the other way, where they're gaining weight because they are stress eating or comfort eating. Changes in sleep, having difficulty falling asleep and or staying asleep. In general, difficulty falling asleep tends to be more associated with anxiety and experiencing waking up during the middle of the night and then struggling to fall back to sleep. That tends to be more associated with depression. Feeling more just slowed down, just kind of restless throughout the day, feeling tired, sluggish, just kind of lacking energy. Just everything just feels really physically draining to do. Having feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt most days. Experiencing problems with thinking, focus, concentration. Maybe you're finding that you're more forgetful, just not able to think of ways to problem solve the way maybe you did before. And then also having thoughts of dying or suicide. So clinical depression, it says that if you're having these symptoms for at least 2 weeks, and again, it's having a great impact on your normal functioning, either at home, at school, or work, or socially, that's when we're looking at depression. And as I said earlier, if you suspect you or a loved one may be experiencing depression, it's important that you reach out to your doctor or a mental health professional. All right. So the other thing I wanted to bring into the picture is, it's kind of like, where does grief fit into all of this? Because again, when we've had a significant loss and we're experiencing grief, the words sadness and depression get thrown around. And so it's kind of like, it can be really confusing to figure out what that is. And so I just want to take a moment to help define the difference. So I really want to emphasize that grief is not only a normal human experience, but it's often a necessary experience in order to heal from a significant loss. And so that's how it really differs from depression. Remember, depression is not a common normal experience. Grief is. That is a normal human response to a loss. So when we kind of break it down and look at, again, just some general ways we experience grief, with grief, it's maybe you have a bad day or even a bad moment. Grief really ebbs and flows like a wave. But it eventually passes or it subsides. It's not as intense or as frequent. So this is different from depression, in that depression, there is no change. It's persistent. It's a constant. The deep sadness we normally feel with grief is usually focused on feelings surrounding a loss. So again, with clinical depression, we don't necessarily have a specific trigger or we feel sad about everything. Whereas grief, it's got that more specific focus. And the other thing is, depression has this overarching effect that kind of just like bleeds into multiple areas of a person's life. Whereas with grief, again, we have more difficult days than others, but you're normally still able to find moments and areas of happiness in your life, and it's not having this overtake on your functioning. The other thing is, typically with grief, you don't normally see an impact on your self-esteem or your self-confidence. Whereas with depression, a person's self-esteem or self-confidence often is impacted by feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, or hopelessness. And so again, it can be really easy to confuse grief with depression, because a lot of the normal symptoms that we experience with grief, we also experience with depression. Things like changes in your sleep, changes in your appetite, poor concentration, lack of energy, not really feeling motivated to want to do anything. So it's really important to keep in perspective, where's this coming from? Is this coming because I've had a significant loss, or is this just a feeling I'm having and it's a constant that I don't really know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling? Okay. So now looking at some different ways to cope with these things. So when we're looking at sadness, just like with any other emotion we feel, allowing yourself to feel your feelings. What I call the negative emotions, anger, sadness, disappointment, they don't feel good. And, it's easy to want to try to ignore it or minimize it or pretend it's not there. And in the moment, we might feel like that's working for us. but it really doesn't. It finds its way to kind of creep out and bleed into other areas where we see it affecting our thinking, how our body physically feels, and just how we're behaving and interacting with others. So it's really important that we're able to allow ourselves to feel what we feel. Continuing to find things and engage in things that bring you happiness and peace. That can help to give you moments of relief or to help you through those tough moments of sadness. Staying connected to others, whether it's family, friends, social activities, any sort of group you might be involved in. Being mindful of getting enough sleep and your nutrition. We know that, if we're not getting enough sleep, that definitely can impact our thinking and our behavior, which is all connected and tied into also how we feel each day. Practicing self-compassion. This is really important. It's so common for us to be hard on ourselves. But being hard on ourselves isn't going to be helpful in motivating you to, try and overcome your challenges. The best way to support yourself through sadness and through whatever sort of challenge or difficulty you're facing is by having self-compassion. And just another note, consider, how spending time on devices, especially things like social media, how does that impact you? It's one of those things where, again, we've become so used to, scrolling through Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, whatever it might be. So paying attention to, what is my mood like when I'm looking at those sorts of things. So treating depression. So you're really going to start with seeking out an assessment from a mental health professional. And kind of the two big things that are usually involved in depression treatment are counseling and medication treatment. It doesn't mean you have to have medication treatment, but just it's common as it's been found that the combination of counseling and medication is helpful in treating depression. So some other things to do that can help with that is to get moving, finding ways to exercise. We know that exercise can help to release what we often hear as feel-good hormones, but it's really the feel-good neurotransmitters. So our dopamine, our serotonin, and that really helps with what's often an imbalance with your neurotransmitters when experiencing a clinical depression. And your exercise doesn't have to be anything crazy, long or real strenuous, even just getting out for, a 15-minute walk, or around the block, but just any sort of movement you incorporate to your day that you find enjoyable, and of course that is within your physical ability. It's very common with depression to feel isolated, so finding ways to get social. This is where one of the beauties of technology really comes into play. It doesn't have to be necessarily an in-person. There's ways to feel connected with others, whether it's, doing Zoom. It could be just a chat with a friend. Maybe it's a support group via Zoom, a phone call, whatever it might be, but just finding ways to feel connected. Humans as a species, we were meant to be connected to others. In fact, a little tidbit note that I found really interesting, I had learned in a training one day, is that when humans feel socially rejected or socially isolated, the part of the brain that lights up is the same part of the brain that lights up when we experience physical pain. I found that to be really fascinating, and I think it really speaks to just how much of socialization is important to our survival and how we were built. Some other things to keep in mind is trying to establish a healthy sleep routine. And I know sleep can be so challenging when going through depression. So a couple things to look at is try to avoid screens or things that would be kind of like on your to-do list at least 45 minutes to an hour before going to bed. Those things can interfere with your brain's ability to start settling down and really preparing your body for sleep. So instead, try to engage in something relaxing. Again, whatever is relaxing for you. It could be coloring, reading, maybe some gentle yoga, just a few ideas. And then also looking at your sleep environment, thinking about, is the temperature of the room ideal for you? Is it dark enough? What's the noise level like? And oftentimes another factor is sometimes all of those things are fine, but we've got the busy brain going on. You climb into bed and you feel like you just can't turn your head off. That's so frustrating. So some things that can help with that is turning on a sleep app or some sort of sound machine that either has nature sounds, listening to a sleep story, or some gentle music. Sometimes focusing on that can kind of help to anchor your mind and get you out of your thoughts and thinking mode. Okay. So again, by all means, this was not a full list of treatment ideas and ways to cope with sadness and depression. These are just a few facts on things to consider when experiencing sadness or depression. Some additional things I just wanted to put out there. I mentioned a sleep app, also working on mindfulness. There's been a lot of research coming out on the benefits of mindfulness. And there's a wide variety of apps these days that are available. I just happen to be more familiar with the Calm app. So I've put that up there as an example. We also have a new national suicide hotline number. So if you or a loved one is, again, struggling with clinical depression, is having, suicidal thoughts, the 988 number is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some of these websites that are listed, these are just the articles that were utilized today for the presentation. So if you're interested, wanting, a little bit more information about some of the things I talked about in the slides, these are the articles that you could go to just get further information about. And the last thing I want to touch on is also our Hope Counseling program. So Hope Counseling is a new program here at Community Hospice. We're approaching the 1-year anniversary that it's been open. And the beauty of our Hope Counseling program is it expands our ability to support our community. So if someone is wanting to work on or needing assistance with things beyond bereavement, such as anxiety, depression, trauma, anger management, maybe it's parenting. These are the sorts of things that Hope Counseling can assist with, whether it's through individual counseling, couples counseling, family counseling. So the contact information is there if you would like to get more information about that service. And so Priscilla, I think I will turn it over to you. Do we have any questions?
Hello. Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. We have one question here. It says, can depression be triggered by grief or loss?
Yeah, it's a great question. By all means, sometimes if we are, for a variety of reasons, maybe we aren't allowing ourselves, or we've got factors in place that are preventing us to grieve a loss, and to go through that process, that can eventually kind of build and turn into a major depression. Or if we feel like, it's, our grief has gotten to a point where, for it, a significant amount of time, it's now really starting to have a major impact on our life. Some of those major areas that I had mentioned, work or school, home life, social life, when we start to see those areas being really significantly impacted, by all means, that can happen.
Okay, and then the other question was, are there any sleep apps that you would recommend for a busy mind? But you touched base on that near the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's really a variety out there. For the most part, they usually have a combination of, maybe some short meditations you can go through, sleep stories, nature sounds. So I've heard wonderful things about a variety of them. The Calm app just happens to be one that I'm familiar with.